Here's what nobody tells you about reading books. Most of them are useless, but a few of them have the power to rewire how you think about money, health, focus, and business. Over the last decade, I've read hundreds of books, not to sound smarter, but to rewire how I think about the 4 quadrants of life. In this video, I'm breaking down the exact books that help me think differently than 99% of people. Let's start with the first quadrant, business. Let's start with business because the way that you think about money and focus changes how you think about everything else. The One Thing by Gary Keller. If you're waking up with 17 priorities and then going to bed and feeling as if nothing's moved, this one's for you. The One Thing showed me that success is about saying no to almost everything. The core focus of this book is that ruthless prioritization is what's going to help you go and get extraordinary results. And so, the one question that he really gets you to think about in this book is what's the one thing that when you do it, it makes everything else easier or unnecessary. In life, what I see with so many founders and just people that I work with is that, at the end of the day, people think they don't have time, when really what they don't have right is their priorities. And oftentimes, as Gary goes over in this book, it's about taking a bit of space from everything for a second to think about, what is that one big thing that when you get that done in life, everything else is so much easier. For me, it helped me reflect on, my own one thing, which is to create exceptional content. When I create exceptional content, we drive leads to my business. We're able to build this revolutionary brand for founders. And so it helped me get a ton of clarity and something that I've taken with me for the rest of my life. But knowing what to focus on only matters if people actually understand what you do. Obviously Awesome by April Dunford. You know that feeling when someone asks you what you do and then you have to describe it in 3 different ways so that they actually understand it? That's the case. This book is for you. This book flipped how I think about positioning. It's not what you sell, it's how you frame it. The real core idea behind this book is that people don't spend enough time actually thinking about their positioning of a product. I know 14 years ago, running an agency, that I was selling a bundle of goods and it was so complex because we had just slapped together all these different things that people didn't really know exactly what we sold. And the issue wasn't that the product didn't work, it was that our positioning just confused people. And when people are confused, they close their wallets. This book goes over how to go about positioning your product so it actually sells, all the way through to how to create a sales script for your sales team so they know how to accurately communicate your product to the market. It's a no-brainer as a high-performance individual. Once I learned how to focus and frame, the next lesson was how to go and scale a business and the people of it fast. Invent and Wander by Jeff Bezos. Terrified of sitting on a decision because you're scared that you're just going to go and screw it up? This book will fix that. Bezos taught me that most decisions are reversible, so stop overthinking them. There's this concept in the book, which really is just a culmination of 20 years of Amazon shareholder letters, where you start to learn this concept as an example, 2-way doors versus 1-way doors. 1-way doors in life are those things that when you make that decision once, it's hard to kind of turn back from there. An example is if you go and buy a super expensive domain for your company and, you brand a company a certain way, that's one of those decisions that's going to be pretty difficult now to go and change your mind on, although still possible. 2-way decisions are the decisions that most of us get faced with every single day. What should we eat for dinner? Should we hire this person? Should we build this system or that one? The reality is that at some point, you just got to make the decision with imperfect information. That's just one of 1,000 lessons from this book. I'd argue that Jeff Bezos is probably a top 5 business thinker to ever live. And so this book is a must. But building with speed only matters if you're building something that lasts. And that's where Ryan Holiday comes in. Perennial Seller by Ryan Holiday. Tired of building things that are good for a week and then just vanish? Well, this book taught me to build for decades instead. So much of online businesses and the culture that we just live in today is all about following a trend or building something impactful over the next year. It becomes much more fascinating and I think just a lot more motivating to go and try to build a timeless, iconic brand for the next 100, 200 years. Look at some of the brands maybe that you most admire. LVMH or Nike or Apple, right? These brands have been around for 50 years and it's more than likely that they're going to be around for another 100 or 200. As you're going and creating that next book you're about to write, or maybe an art piece or a piece of content, this book really encouraged me to start thinking way more long-term about the projects that I'm building. Not thinking in a year or 5 years or even 10 years. How can I create an upcoming book for Founder OS that people are still referring to in 100 years from now? This book will get you thinking a lot bigger about those creative pursuits, and I think is a must read as well. All of this matters, but nothing's going to work if your culture is slow. Amp It Up by Frank Slootman. Your team's comfortable, your culture's nice, and your growth has completely flatlined. Sound familiar? Amp It Up remind me that culture isn't about vibes, it's velocity. You know, Frank Slootman's energy after reading this book, honestly, I found it infectious, and it showed me that in order to make change happen and to get to this big vision that I have in life, I need to amp it up, which to me sort of means like any given moment, any given hour in a company, you have the opportunity to really push the boundary, or on the other side, to kind of kick back and be more chill. If we have big visions of what we're trying to build, you always want to be pushing the envelope hour by hour, day by day, week by week. And it's, you know, this book allowed me to start building companies that were more like sports teams versus families. High performers that have fun when we're winning. And once you're moving fast, here's how you make what you're building irresistible. The Luxury Strategy by John Kapfer and Vincent Bastian. Ever wonder why luxury brands have 10x the prices and have 10x the demand with people lining up around the corner to pay? This book cracked the code for me. One of the quotes I love in this book is that luxury is the art of creating the unnecessary and making it desirable. When I go and think about many of the businesses I'm building, when it comes to the brand, the experience, how people feel, I want it to feel like this luxury experience. You know, these ideas of symbols, creating a community around what you're building, and oftentimes going to distances, not because you have to, but because the general brand and this experience you're trying to create requires that. I think there's a lot of inspiration that we can find from them and bring them into our companies and the experiences that we create. A lot of these brands stand the test of time because they just go so far with the actual handmade aspect of the brand that just creates something that people can't help but line up for, right? And pay through the roof for as well. That's business. 6 books, 6 mental models. Now let's talk about something that's a little bit close to home. Your health and personal performance. Now, while you're going through all these, you may be suffering from certain problems you're having going, or you have big goals in life. And what I've done is I've synthesized my entire reading list via the link in the description. And I've put each book that I think is a must read, and then why you should read it and what it will help you solve. So if you're interested in checking that out, go and check it out via the link in the description. Your body and attention are the operating system that everything around you runs on. So if you're not paying attention to them, you know, you're going to suffer. These are the books that showed me how to work, rest, and focus. You know, what I learned is it's not just about the outputs in life, it's about what you actually input into your system to thrive as much as you can. Deep Work by Cal Newport. Busy all day, but you can't remember the last time you created something that actually mattered and that you were proud of? Well, start here. Deep Work taught me that focused attention is the new unfair advantage. People do the most shallow work ever. A little 30-minute thing here, checking emails first thing in the morning, you know, checking social media as soon as they wake up. But what we've lost sight of as humanity is that the real genius, the real art, the real beauty that has been created around us, most of that has been created from deep work. You know, that sacred time that you have every day to block out all distractions and work on the thing that is most important, that's going to move you forward in the biggest way possible. You know, these days now, I wake up every day, and from 8 a.m. till noon every day, I have 4 hours of uninterrupted time to work on the stuff that only I can do. You know, if you're looking to go and accomplish a masterpiece with your life, this book is a must. But focus without boundaries is just burnout with better lighting. Essentialism by Greg McKeown. If you say yes to everything and secretly resent half the things on your calendar, you need this. This book taught me that saying no is how you protect what matters. If you don't prioritize your life, no one else will. You know, there's constantly different things tugging at our time. You know, family have obligations, society asks us to do certain things, work comes up. And at the end of the day, we can lose track of, you know, what we're really trying to accomplish and how we want to go and live our lives. This book taught me that less but better, right? Doing less things, filling my schedule with less stuff, going and surrounding myself with less people, and focusing on quality relationships, quality work, quality days, versus just being busy all the time. And once you've cleared the noise, here's how you think bigger. The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. This book is going to give you the kick in the ass you need. This book taught me one thing: action cures fear. And most of us think way too small in life. You know, when I think about, you know, the big vision I have for my life, the big way I want to go and manage my lifestyle, the big vision that I have for Founder OS and my team and the businesses and the community, the real thing that comes there, right, is the gap between, you know, where you are and that big vision is action. Action cures fear. When you're not sure you should send that email, send the damn thing. When you're not sure if you should reach out to that mentor, reach out to them. It's the action that you take that's going to help you bit by bit, tiny win by tiny win, get to where you're looking to go. The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. Remember when you used to have ideas that actually excited you? This book brings that back. Rick Rubin taught me that creativity isn't about output, it's about awareness. This book kind of gives me a sense of it's Rick Rubin, this really successful music producer, one of the most iconic, people in the music industry over the last 100 years. It's got this mix of sort of creativity, spirituality, and philosophy. When we think about, pursuing some creative project, oftentimes we make it way too big in our heads. And oftentimes it's, is there that first little action you can take that's going to create that ripple effect that isn't only going to impact the project, but as that project gets released to the world, it's also going to have that amazing ripple effect in terms of the benefit you're going to have to thousands, if not millions of lives as well. And the best way to stay creative, well, stay curious. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki. This book is really good if you're looking to read a book that basically just feels like a meditation. When I read the pages of this book, I really take it in, slow down. I think this is one of the most legendary books on Zen. I've read it a few times in my life, but oftentimes just like to come back to it, every 18 months, 2 years, just to kind of ground back in and root myself into the beauty of the Zen meditation process and way of thinking. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. Quotes like this from the book get you thinking about this idea of, simplifying your way of thinking. It's not about trying to do everything in life and getting so caught up in stress and anxiety. At the end of the day, most of our lives are actually really simple. Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. Keep telling yourself you'll travel, you'll slow down, you'll finally do that thing you've always wanted when you just hit that next milestone. Well, this book will get you to stop lying to yourself. Die with Zero asked me, what's the point of being the richest person in the graveyard? And this book kind of made me rethink how I think about my own wealth. At each age, there are core experiences that are best to do at that given age. And so when you are given the opportunity, you should just go for it. As an example, you're in your 20s. It's a great chance to go backpacking, go explore, because if you don't do that experience in your 20s, you may not have that opportunity in your 40s when you have kids and family and other obligations. So you should just go for it. In your 30s, in your 40s, your 50s, there's also these sorts of experiences that come up. Maybe going to Europe, going to different vacations, going on different experiences, flying out your family to different things on your own dime. There's opportunities that we can do to kind of live a fulfilling life, but most people put off living and just get so lost in the day-to-day. And this book forces you to kind of take a step back and go, all this money you're looking to make, what's it all for? The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. So deep in the grind that you forgot what surrendering feels like? This book taught me that letting go is key. This book taught me really the benefit of surrendering. I know in my own life, I oftentimes have troubles letting go. We let stress, anxiety, priorities all accumulate to a point where sometimes it can kind of break you. There was a point about a decade ago in my life where, I was under a ton of pressure and it was causing me to crumble. This book came to me almost at just like divine timing. Really then showed me this way that this really successful entrepreneur and spiritual teacher was able to start incorporating the concept of surrendering into more of his life to really get over some insane challenges. Letting go, I think, is something that we need to practice, right? Letting go of stress, letting go of those difficult conversations, letting go of the mistakes and the failures that we've had. Let that shit go. This book, isn't just a bunch of advice. It's telling the story of Michael Singer's life. And along the way, you can see these pivotal moments where surrendering has helped him go and evolve to a new level of a human. So that's health. 7 books that taught me to protect my energy, my health, and, my vitality. Now let's get on to the third quadrant, relationships. You can't scale a vision if you can't communicate it. These are the books that taught me to become a better leader by talking less, listening more, and really investing in communication and those around me. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. In this book, I learned the one critical question. What is the real challenge for you? And then the key follow-up question when you're trying to help and coach, whether it's your team or another individual. What else? Oftentimes I think about leadership. Back in the day, I would always default to, I need to talk. I need to be the one owning the conversation. Oftentimes it's come at my detriment, right? You just talk too much and listen far too little. This book kind of goes through a series of core questions that are essential if you're really looking to go and coach someone. I think when we think of ourselves ourselves as CEOs or managers or leaders in any aspect of our lives, oftentimes we can learn a ton from being an amazing coach. And the coaching habit helps you do just that. But asking questions only works if you're in the right state. The 15 commitments of conscious leadership. Walking into meetings and feeling reactive and defensive, well, it's not just your strategy that's a problem, it's your state. Now, this book taught me to have an overall demeanor as a leader that was much more curious, versus going and being accusatory of someone that you think has done something wrong, or going and pointing out initially, the things that you need done. Can you approach a given conversation with your team, colleagues, family, whoever, in a way that's just much more curious, inquisitive, and just ask questions? We all have these opinions and we think that those opinions must be right. But oftentimes, what's actually true is that the opposite of that opinion is equally as true, if not more true. And so if we can approach conversations being more curious, we're opening up an environment where we can learn, we can come to some common ground, and we can actually make 1 + 1 = 10. And when you're in the right state, here's how you connect. Quadrant 4, lifestyle. All the success in the world means absolutely nothing if you're miserable while you're living it. These are the books that reminded me that freedom, peace, and meaning are the real skills, and that you can actually grow them by practicing them. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius figured out 2,000 years ago that the only thing you can control is your mind, not all the things around you. Meditations taught me that I can't control events, but I can control my response. It's duty over drama and really practicing self-governance. I find myself oftentimes, if I'm not careful, blaming external events for how I feel. And the reality is that, we can't control all the things outside of us. What he had done is at the end of every day, kept this private journal where he'd go and document his own philosophy on life. And it was always meant to just be this private thing, but it was found eventually, and it was published, and it stood the test of time. And so what you're getting while you read this book is this famous emperor's take on how he was able to manage his own energy, his mindset, amidst all the turbulence of life. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Morgan Housel is by far probably my favorite author. This book taught me that wealth is about what you don't see. Everyone's financial behavior is actually emotional, Oftentimes it's not logical. At the end of the day, the money, the wealth, it's all about peace of mind. And the core metric behind peace of mind is sleep at night. And so when you're thinking about investments or money, what you really should just be thinking about is, does this thing that I'm about to buy or this money I'm about to make, does it get me more peace of mind? And does it allow me to sleep at night? There are sometimes these investments that we can make that don't necessarily make financial sense, but they do bring us peace of mind. For some people I know, that's like buying their house. They know they're not going to make a lot of money on it over time, but it just makes them feel good knowing that they have a home base, they're safe, they're secure. Make sure that you're thinking about that, Taking care of your peace of mind, not just your bank account. And if you want to be truly wealthy, here's what the Stoics knew. A Guide to the Good Life by William B. Irvine. The Stoics show you that comfort makes you weak, and Irvine shows you how to stay sharp. One of the most powerful lessons I learned from this book was this idea of negative visualization. Oftentimes, we'll find ourselves maybe walking on the street, and all we're circulating in our mind is all these negative thoughts. How our life could be better, how we could be doing more, how we screwed up that thing. Sometimes it's just useful to visualize, well, this morning when you were walking, you could have just gotten hit by a bus. Yesterday, when you were playing that sport, you could have died on the field. And when you start to think about, okay, shit, life could be so much worse than it is right now, suddenly you leave yourself with just some gratitude. Another thing I took from the book is the idea of practicing voluntary friction, going for hard workouts every day, or taking on some difficult challenge, or doing things that, make you feel uncomfortable every single day because it kind of sharpens iron. And here's the freedom that comes from that. The Courage to be Disliked, Ichiro Kashimi. Managing everyone's opinions is exhausting, and this book shows you how to stop. This book taught me that other people's approval isn't my task. I had a buddy, Steve, years ago, that when I started building my personal brand, he goes, Matt, why are you doing that? Why are you trying to be famous? The reality was, I wasn't doing it to be famous, I was doing it because I knew I could have a big impact, and to me, it kind of fit my core zone of brilliance. I just had to do what I knew was right and go and get out there, build content, grow my audience, and make something that I wanted to make that I knew could help a lot of people's lives. And this was the genesis of Founder OS, which is this amazing community of high growth entrepreneurs that I've created. And the reality is that you have to have courage to be disliked. You have to have courage to just be your true self. Don't wait for the crowd to applaud you. Don't wait for that friend to pat you on the back. Give yourself the pat on the back you need and just do that thing that sits in your soul that you know you are meant to do. The Almanac of Naval Ravikant by Eric Jorgensen. Naval taught me to play long-term games with long-term people. When you're going and building a team, building a business, surrounding yourself with people, ideally you want to have a circle that you can keep for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years until you die. Every business, whether you are aware of it or not, is really a people business. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with people that you want to do life with. One of the quotes that helped change my approach to things was earn with your mind, not your time. And from the exercises he recommended in the book, I came up with this ambitious hourly rate. And from there was able to start going and delegating, deleting, or automating the core things in my life that I knew I shouldn't be doing any longer. And here's how you use chaos to grow. Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. Anti-Fragile taught me to really benefit from volatility, not just survive it. I remember in life at certain times there's been, a lot of my friends or the world that has been scared to go and start things. But it's in those moments that I actually see the greatest point of opportunity. Some of my businesses have actually been born in some of the biggest crises out there in the financial markets. It was in those moments when everyone else was panicking, I was able to go and really build something seriously valuable by staying focused and building a business as well that was anti-fragile. This book gives you some of the core tenets to anti-fragility and how to go and implement them in your life today. Wabi Sabi by Nobuo Suzuki. The Japanese mastered imperfection 400 years ago, and it will save you from perfectionism today. Wabi Sabi taught me that beauty lies in imperfection. When I first started going and sharing content online as an example, I thought that everything had to be immaculate. The sound, the color, the design, my outfit, my on-camera presence, it all had to be perfect. I had to say the exact words. So much so that I thought the only way to go and deliver content was, I needed a teleprompter because I needed to make sure that every word was immaculate. What I quickly learned was that, Matt, people are watching these videos because they want to get to know you, your insights, your playbooks, your systems, and also just your vibe and your energy. This concept of Wabi Sabi really helped me out in life because, it's this beautiful Japanese philosophy of that there's actually a ton of beauty in those imperfections, and that it's through those little chips in how we say something, those little mistakes that we make, those little isms that make us unique, that actually help us create something beautiful that's recognizable, and that people can really resonate with. If even one lesson from these books hits you today, well, go and apply it. Don't wait for tomorrow. Go and take the book that really stuck out to you the most and go and get it and start applying it to your life and your business today. Along the way, if you want to go and see my whole reading list as well as recommendations as to the best book that you should read based on maybe the different problems or goals you have in your life, you can go and check that out via the first link in the description below. Go and get that in the description. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Go and watch this video on how to go and level up your life in an insanely simple way, and I'll see you in the next one. Let's win together.